Good afternoon from the Philippines. Good morning and good evening to friends and guests who might be joining us from other parts of the globe. My name is Jean Hardalesa Mijares from the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, and I will be serving as your host for today's session. It is my honor to welcome you all to the second session of our second webinar series titled Climate Research as If People Mattered. The name draws inspiration from the article Small is Beautiful, Climate Change Science as If People Mattered, written by Dr. Regina Rodriguez and Dr. Theodore Shepard, who are the co-chairs of the My Climate Risk Lighthouse activity of the World Climate Research Program. It reflects on insights from E.F. Schumacher's celebrated book, Small is Beautiful, what insights may be applied in closing the gap between how climate information is being produced and used. Earlier this week, we had our inaugural session with Dr. Vandana Singh, and before that, we also ended our first webinar series a couple of weeks back. So if you joined us then, welcome back. It is great to have you again with us. If this is your first time joining one of our webinars, we hope you stick around for the rest of the series. Today's session is titled Sustainable Production and Stakeholder Engagement. This webinar series is organized by the My Climate Risk Ateneo de Manila University Regional Hub, which is hosted by the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability. And this session in particular is co-hosted by the Agriculture Sustainability Initiatives for Nature, or ASIN, with special thanks to the University of the Philippines Marine Science Institute, the National Brackish Water Fisheries Technology Center of the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources in the Philippines, and the Tambuyog Development Center. My Climate Risk, or MCR, is a lighthouse activity of the World Climate Research Program, which aims to develop and mainstream a bottom-up approach to regional climate risk. In our previous series, we strove to have a better understanding of local contexts and experiences of climate change and the requirements of decision makers. In this webinar series, we will explore how different contexts and experiences of climate change are considered and how we may apply these in research design and management plans. Today's session in particular will focus on community engagement and active collaboration across stakeholders and institutions, particularly with oyster culture. Just some reminders before we start. Please note that the program is being recorded on Zoom. On Zoom, all participants are muted automatically as they enter the meeting room. Throughout the session, kindly type in any comments or questions in the chat box here on Zoom. Participants via the Facebook Live may also type in their comments or questions in the comment section. We will collect all of these for the open forum later on. And finally, there will be an evaluation survey at the end of the session. Requests for e-certificates may be made through the same form. At this point, we would like to ask everyone to settle in for the prayer to be followed by the Philippine National Anthem. Interfaith prayer for our climate. All-sustaining spirit, you encircle space and time. You swirl and sing through every season. In silent stillness, you settle deep into the soul of creation. Your sacred wisdom has come to us this day in the words of ancient truth, through the words of present-day prophets, for the ones whose future well-being is formed by our response today. May our actions be formed by what has been spoken and heard and felt here today. Make us wise and faithful stewards of creation, sustained by your spirit forevermore. Amen.
kasinanganan, alam ng puso sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting sa manlulupi. Di ka pasisiin sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bukaw. May nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdiningning. Ang bituing at araw niya kailan pa may magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng walhating pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang hinigaya na pag may mag-aapil, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Now, to formally welcome everyone to today's session, we would like to call on Dr. Maria Asunta Cuyageng, Professor at the Department of Educational Leadership and Management of the Gokongwei Brothers School of Education and Learning Design at Ateneo de Manila University, Executive Director of the Lili Gokongwei Ngochua Leadership Academy, Executive Director of the ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture, and a collaborator of the MCR Ateneo de Manila University Regional Hub to deliver the opening remarks.
Thank you, Jean. Dr. Kendra Gotanco Gonzalez, Ms. Abby Fallis, Ms. Jean Hardeleza Mijares, Mr. M.Y. Rodolfo. Thank you for inviting me and being part of this webinar. And to our dear participants, thank you for being part of this My Climate Risk webinar series. Many of us still feel the impact of Paeng, especially those devastated by the rains, floods, and resulting mudslides. We still remember the other typhoons which hit other parts of our country and the strong rains from Habagat. Extreme weather has become a regular event. We are now really feeling the impact of years of neglect. So it is no surprise that progressive businesses and organizations are taking on this challenge. After all, our resources are at stake. The operations of any organization, big or small, has a direct impact on sustainability. Excuse me. Sorry about that.
No worries po.
So there was I. Extreme weather has become a regular event. We are now feeling the impact of years of neglect. And as I was saying, the operations of any organization, big or small, has the biggest direct impact on sustainability. And for most companies, this is about production, whether it is agriculture, marine production, or production in manufacturing. No? Businesses often grapple with the challenges of designing their systems and processes to make them efficient, clean, and circular, while being cost effective. We need to be efficient so that less energy and materials are used, clean so that there is practically no pollution, circular so that there's practically no waste. A good sustainability strategy that addresses sustainable production can reduce climate risk because it can decrease carbon footprint or increase carbon sinks, and hopefully reduce the occurrence of extreme weather. Good strategies can build resilience because they leave room for adjustments and innovation, and often they engage and empower their people. Now, this human side is a very important aspect of sustainability. The implementation of systems and processes require understanding and commitment from stakeholders, from its leaders and managers to its employees and workers, from its suppliers to its customers, from its partners to the communities in which they operate. Leaders agree on sustainability strategy or a clean technology, but it is the managers, the employees, the workers who need to implement them well. Suppliers need to be on board, and customers need to understand the new value they are getting. More importantly, everyone simply needs to understand how the chosen strategy or technology could reduce risk and build resilience. This can only happen if an organization engages its stakeholders toward the achievement of its sustainability goals. So I am just as excited as you are to hear more about sustainable production and the value of stakeholder engagement, the value of community engagement, as it brings together two important aspects that are crucial to any management of sustainability. I hope that the session today can make us more committed stakeholders for climate and sustainability solutions. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kuyagkeng, and I echo your excitement to hear more about the human side of businesses central to achieving sustainability and resilience and reducing climate risk. It is now my pleasure to introduce the speaker for today's session. Mr. Raymond Rodolfo is a lecturer at the Department of Environmental Science of the Ateneo de Manila University. His current research is primarily on land-sea interface, which includes coastal geohazards and hydrogeological processes, such as submarine groundwater discharge, which serves as a pathway for nutrients and contaminants to coastal ecosystems. Mr. Rodolfo also focuses on sustainable oyster culture in estuaries, which highlights the importance of community engagement and active collaboration across various stakeholders and institutions. He obtained his master's degree at the Environmental Science Department of the Ateneo de Manila University and is currently pursuing a doctoral degree in marine science at the University of the Philippines in Diliman. Truly, it is an honor to welcome our guest speaker, Mr. Raymond Rodolfo, whom we would call Sir Emoy. Sir Emoy, the floor is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jean and Ma'am Chut. Wait, I'll just share my screen. Okay, and play from start. Okay, so I hope you can see my screen now. I'll just tidy up my desktop.
Yes, we see your screen.
Sound check. So can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you well.
Can you hear my heart beating because I'm already very nervous? Okay, so wait. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity to share some stories of my experiences as an environmental scientist and as someone who's working with oysters. Anyway, I'll tell my story in a bit. So thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you'll find this short sharing talk useful. Okay, so the general outline for my talk today will be, I just want to discuss a little on the importance of sustainable, basically food production. And then a short sharing on my personal history of community engagement, how it all started for me, and how it changed me, how it changed my approach to things, how it changed my approach to doing my science. And then I'll talk about ASIN, the company I'm working for now, other than being a lecturer at Ateneo de Manila University. So I'll talk about ASIN and the importance of a community stakeholder engagement from our part as an industry partner, as a company. And then I'll share stories of community stakeholder engagement from a recent project with UPMSI, BFAR, Tamboyog Development Center, which is funded by the Department of Science and Technology. So I'll share a bit on that. And then as pictures on how the community engages. And then some takeaways from at least my experience working with the communities, specifically for this project, the Site2SOS, some challenges and strengths, especially I asked one of our community organizers, so what are the challenges so you at least you faced in the past couple of months while doing the project? And then I just would, to end the talk, I will express my gratefulness to partners and sponsors. So first, sustainability. I would like to talk about the importance, briefly, on the importance of sustainability from my perspective. I'm sure a lot of you here are experts on sustainability as well. But for me, what is striking is that when I was younger with more hair, before the end of the millennium, diba? In 2015, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Millennium Development Goals. So there are 8 goals. And now, and then to focus on development. And then sustainability development is not so much of a word nowadays, or at least it's not as important as sustainability. Which I guess as if you look at the United Nations goals, it's no longer development goals, but sustainable development goals. Sorry, the development part is still there, but the important word, the important guiding principle, a very important guiding principle is there, which is sustainability. And to sustain is to endure, basically. And then one thing that when I was looking at the definition of sustainability, one particular word struck me, that is to nourish. So I guess it's not just sustainability is not just to force a project or something to endure for a longer period of time, but it is to nourish, to give life. And so it's also important for us to sustain our food production. And as we sustain food production, we'll be able to feed more people, and with well-fed people, we'll be able to help us attain the other sustainable development goals. I'm sorry if it sounds a little bit vague or simple, but for me, I think that is what hits me, whenever I think about whenever I think about sustainability. Next, from a geologist perspective, because my undergrad is geology, and every time I give a lecture on science, geology, environmental science, I always ask my students to consider their existence on Earth in the context of the entire history of the universe, in the context of the entire creation history. And a very good way of putting it is laying it all out in a calendar year, with a Big Bang happening in January 1, and modern humans, our ancestors, evolved only 8 minutes before midnight, December 31, 1152. And I guess this will bring more meaning to the word sustainability and more meaning to the invitation for us to live sustainable lives, because it basically took almost the entire 14 billion history of the universe to make itself habitable to human beings, to us. Now, we can look at it in 2 ways. We can look at it that, wow, I'm so special that I can do anything I want. I'm the center of the universe. But we can also look at it from another perspective, like in the perspective of humility and gratefulness. And that because it took the universe to prepare itself for a very, very long time to sustain me, therefore, I am invited to be more responsible, to be more grateful, to be more generous, to be more simple. That matter. And in that 14 billion years, okay, the ecosystem services were set in place. As an environmental scientist, and we always tell this to our students, that the earth provides us with services basically for free. So the ecosystem services, with the benefits we obtain from ecosystems, no, both natural and managed. And ecosystem services are basically processes, basically cycles. These are basically life-giving processes and cycles that sustain our lives. That was set in place throughout the entirety of creation. And so whenever we talk about sustainability, let's think about these services. Whenever we talk about how do we affect the earth, nature, the environment, let's talk about how do we affect the services that nature, that the ecosystem provides for us, which allows us to exist. Okay. And then when I was preparing this talk, one thing that popped into my head is also this, Malthusian, the graph, that Malthus proposed, that the human population, as it continues to increase, supported by food production, it will basically outgrow food production. But this is before technologies. And then why am I showing this? Because of the concept of, I guess, carrying capacity, of limiting factors. But humans, we are able to basically surpass that Malthusian limit because of technology. And so this is another graph that I really like, from Meadows et al., limits of growth. So like Malthus, they basically track how population grew as it is being supported by food and then industrial output, technological output. However, food and industrial output also uses resources. And so as your food per capita, industrial output per capita, population increases, the resources will be on a decline. Okay. And then another thing that increases is pollution, especially since our topic, the general topic of these talks is on climate research. Pollution, particularly greenhouse gases, have a big effect on us. In this generation, in the future generation. So I guess these are two important graphs that I think are vital, at least to stating the case for sustainable food production. And take note, this is in the news yesterday. According to the United Nations, the world population will reach 8 billion by next week. And then the question is, will it still fall within the Earth's carrying capacity or not? Whether it will fall in the Earth's carrying capacity or not, projections still say that in 2050, okay, there will be more or less 10 billion people, and there's a demand to feed those 10 billion people. And then the basic strategy is to produce more food without using more land, and at the same time lowering emissions. And one strategy that the World Resources Institute suggests is that we increase fish supply, because there's no need, basically, or very little need to change the land use, okay, especially for wild capture fisheries. So it's important to increase fish supply. But we also know that wild capture fisheries is also on the decline because of the growing pressure from population. Therefore, it's important to improve wild fisheries management. And at the same time, it's also important to improve the productivity and performance and environmental performance of aquaculture in order to augment production coming from wild fisheries, capture fisheries. Okay, and since I'm working with Asin now, and then one of our main focus right now is oyster aquaculture, and then let this we use this as a guide, or let this be our guide. From according to the World Bank, sustainable aquaculture can be divided into three main sustainability points. Okay. So first is environmental sustainability. Aquaculture should not create significant disruption to the ecosystem or cause the loss of biodiversity or substantial pollution impact. That's one. And then next is economic sustainability. Aquaculture must be a viable business with good long-term prospects. So it's not charity work. Kailangan it should be paying more or less for itself in order to sustain it. And then finally, the social and community sustainability aspect, wherein aquaculture must be socially responsible and contribute to community well-being. So these are three important sustainability points to achieve sustainable aquaculture. And then to reach this, to attain this, it's also important for collaboration between different sectors, business sector, the industry sector, the government, okay, and then citizens. And then later on, as I share our experience with Saito SOS, two other sectors play an important part here. And then that is the higher educational institutions, and then the non-government organizations, which can actually fall within any of this, within the government and citizens group as well. Okay, and so again, why sustainability important? Why is it important to work for sustainable food production? Because we need to feed our fellow men. Okay, we need to feed our fellow men. We need to give them a good quality of life. Okay, if possible, parang similar to what we are experiencing now, if not better. Okay, and then we need to work within our Earth's carrying capacity. And so I go to the next part of my talk, chapter of my talk, and then that is my personal history of community engagement. My personal, it all started with disaster risk reduction work, geologic hazards. I'm a geologist, and then I have been working with several colleagues on disasters, landslide, flooding, among other things. And then it all started with my engagement in communities. Started with my relationship with different non-governmental organizations. Now, this is just an example of one of the projects that I've worked with some other friends. So this is in Tacloban, so right after Yolanda. So we helped the community find a suitable relocation site, and then we engaged them. Basically, these geohazard maps were produced by us, geologists, but the communities were able to produce their own geological hazard maps, which are basically similar to what we have produced. Okay, and so it's important. My takeaway there is that if you just teach them the concepts, and then they will be able to draw from their personal knowledge and experiences and basically come up with the same thing. And so this is what the relocation site looks like right now. So this is the Pope Francis Village in Diit, Tacloban. Mas maganda na siguro yan ngayon. This was taken, if I'm not mistaken, just before the pandemic, and I'm sure that there are a lot of developments now. So these communities are fisher folks, which are survivors of Yolanda, and then they also contributed in making their houses, choosing the design, and then basically preparing the mortar, setting the hollow blocks, among other things. And so my gratefulness for these NGOs, Urban Poor Associates, specifically Sir Dennis Murphy. He's been instrumental in on my experience in community development. The Ateneo's Institute of Social Order also played a part. Malati Catholic Church, wherein before we were coming up with parish-based community disaster risk reduction management plan, and then TAO, or Technical Assistance Organization, has been inviting us from time to time to work with communities. And then I leave this particular part of my talk with the motto of TAO. It is time for us to go to the people rather than ask the people, especially the poor, to come to us. So basically, that's how it all started for me. And then my apologies for this talk. I will probably interchange community and stakeholder from time to time, or if not always. So I will just to define it, that whenever I'm talking about stakeholders, I'm talking about community stakeholders. And then the operational definition from the UNDP for stakeholders is that these are groups that have a role and interest in the objectives and implementation of a program or project. And so that's me talking from a lecturer and student of environmental sciences point of view. Now I would like to share my experiences from the industry perspective, as I am also working for a small startup company called Agriculture Sustainability Initiatives for Nature Incorporated, ASIN for short. ASIN is the Tagalog word for salt. Our main goal is to provide high quality and traceable agricultural produce using sustainable and environmentally sound practices. And right now we're focusing on oysters. Now, why oysters? Because there is a demand for oysters. So take note that we are basically a business. So someone came up to us and asked us if we can help out source their demand for oysters. And so that is the challenge for us. And then, again, because this is a climate research talk, the shellfish have several environmental benefits. One is it reduces nutrient loading. So if you have lots of nutrient loading coming from anthropogenic activities, feeds for other agricultural products, or contaminants, or from effluents, okay, which will cause a eutrophication, a bloom in the algae. But with the presence of shellfish, they will take in all of those algae, okay, and so they help reduce the chances of eutrophication, okay. And then they also serve as a carbon sink. They take in carbon, and their shell is basically composed of calcium carbonate, okay. And then they also use carbon in their soft tissues. However, they also can serve as a carbon source through respiration and the dissolution of their shell. So again, it's not a silver bullet. It's something that has its own strengths and weaknesses. Now, the challenges for oyster culture. Now, this is from our experience in ASEAN. For the brother, sister foreigners who are not familiar with the Filipino language, oysters in Tagalog is talaba. Okay. And so the challenges, I wrote it down. This is just a joke between us, but I guess this is also true. Oh, bahay means houses. So talaba is oyster. Talabahay means that a lot of the oyster farms here are grown next to the houses. Okay. And then that's why we call it talabahay. And most of the time, these houses also take care of pigs. Pigs in Tagalog is baboy, so talababoy. And then another thing that I forgot to mention is that talabanyo. Banyo is their comfort room, their restroom. And so you can see that challenges in oyster culture goes hand in hand with environmental challenges. And another thing is talababaw. Babaw means shallowing. And in the Philippines, one of the most common practices of oyster culture is just driving down stakes into the sediment, and which causes the shallowing of that particular body of water. So again, the challenges that oyster culture, oyster farming is facing goes hand in hand with environmental challenges. In Tagalog, para siyang magkakambal. It's like they're twins. Okay, and then another challenge is this, no? Unsanitary post-harvest processes. So there's no way that we'll be able to export our oysters if the customers will see how they are being handled after harvest. And so I guess this was a wake-up call for us. We cannot just go to any supplier or oyster growing areas and then just buy oysters. We really need to do something else. And so our concept is Project Talaba. Again, Talaba is the Tagalog for oysters, and then to transform Talaba to Talabest. Transform it into the best that it can be. So these are oysters that are grown from our hatchery. Okay, the big one on the left side of your screen is about 8 months old, ready for harvest. The smaller ones are about a month and a half old. Okay, so our strategy so shifted from just going to areas and then just buying it from the growers to let's try to change their practices. Okay, let's try to change their farming methods from from the stake method, which is harmful to the environment, to a more sustainable method that is promoted by the government, which is the RAF method. Okay, and then we also our idea is also we cannot just change the practice in the estuarine areas. We know that it's really a ridge to reef system. So whatever activities that we have in the upper watershed will greatly affect the quality of water where the oysters are being grown. Okay, so this was our challenge, and it's a very hard challenge. But anyway, slowly but surely, trying to make some gains, some important gains. And so from the stake method, this is a better, a more sustainable way of growing oysters in floating rafts. Okay, and so our first engagement with a community is with the IPIL Action Group. It's a group in Padre Burgos, Quezon. Okay, now what is special about this group is because it's the presence of, I guess I would call them champions. Champions are always very important if you would like to push or parang if you would like to work for a certain cause. The champions are Kuya Nardo and Ate Bella, the husband and wife tag team, which is the heart of their group, their community, which also shares the same values that we have. Another important, happy coincidence, important coincidence with the IPIL Action Group is that they were organized by the Tambuyog Development Center, which will play an important part inside to us later. Now, we were impressed with the IPIL Action Group because they were very organized, and rightly so, because they were organized by an NGO. And then finally, they're also beneficiaries of the BIFAR, Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. And so they have a very good track record working with government agencies. And so again, it's hard to work with communities. Well, as I've mentioned, as I've shared to you in the previous slide, parang we were like taking more than we could chew. But encountering communities and organizations like the IPIL Action Group makes it easier or gives us hope as a company. And so I will now share stories of community stakeholder engagement in Site2 SOS. So inspired by our experience with EPIL Action Group, and then I guess that the further invited us to work with communities all the more. And so Site2 SOS stands for Site Characterization and Implementation of Innovative Sustainable Oyster Systems. But we sometimes just shorten it parang that using our tagline, science to the rescue, Site2 SOS, science to the rescue. And I'll share a little bit more about that in the succeeding slides. So it all started at the height of the pandemic. In 2020, a year into the pandemic, the there was a call from DOST, from the Cradle project of S4 CP, SC4P of DOST, to apply for a grant which covers these following thematic areas. And so we applied for the sustainable supply and logistics because from our experience during the pandemic, we were still able to conduct our buying from the communities, particularly in Padre Burgos and Pagbilao. And so and then the communities were very grateful that even if there were so much restrictions that are in place, they were still able to sell their products and earn some money. So I guess that's very important. And so at this time, we were working with Dr. Deo Onda of the UP Marine Science Institute, who also shares the same values as us. And so we came up with a project and applied for a grant. And then the main lead for the project is Dr. Onda of the University of the Philippines Marine Science Institute. And then in partnership with the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, particularly the National Brackish Water Fisheries Technology Center in Pagbilao, whose OIC now is Sir Roy Fondes. Roy Ortega, Fondes Ortega. And then our NGO partner is Tambuyog Development Center. And ASIN, on our part, serves as the industry partner. So we serve as the market. Okay, because what will we get from here as an industry partner? We just want to establish a new site that can produce oysters. Because, again, sustainability plan, what if our main source of oysters, let's say in Aklan, what if the operations are halted because of red tide, and then we cannot supply oysters to our clients. Therefore, there's a need to develop new areas that can supply oysters, again grown in a sustainable manner. So this is, and so the Site2 SOS basically is this, and then it's composed of different components, but basically it's a collaborative effort to engage with the community using science and then bridging the gap between community and industry. And then hopefully suggest policies that will make the industry more sustainable. We chose the Macalelon as a site because of the presence of the Tambuyog Development Center there. There's an initial community organizing in the area, and then they already have potential beneficiaries, which will, from beneficiaries, they are now stakeholders, partners of the project. So this is Macalelon. It's located in the province of Quezon. It's still in the island of Luzon. They are facing Tayabas Bay. There's no existing oyster culture in the area, but there are oysters, wild oysters, all along the rivers. Okay, so the first time that we went there, it's basically from the mayor to the marketplace. So this is the previous mayor of the area, who was very supportive to our project. And then, so we basically shared the idea of the project to the mayor. to the council, municipal council, and then all the way to the marketplace, to the fisher folks, to the beneficiaries, partner, and then to the stakeholders of this project. Okay, and then they are very supportive. They would attend trainings that we would conduct. So this person on here is Consihal Dan. There's all, again, as I said earlier, there's always a representative from the government. And so I go back to sustainable aquaculture, and then the importance of the collaboration between the different sectors. So the government is always present. Then on our part, and then from the part of the UPMSI and then BFAR, they were engaged in environmental monitoring, and then with the objective of transferring the knowledge to the communities. So environmental monitoring, but eventually will proceed towards citizen science. Then they have been very, they were working hard, no, in the field, gathering data in the field and then processing it in the lab in order to come up with baseline data and monthly monitoring data, so that we can help determine if our practices are actually really environmentally sustainable. Then another, and then on our part from Asin, our input is to develop a remote setting methods in order to augment the existing broodstock in the area using broodstocks collected from that area. So no transplantation of oyster species occurred. And these are just examples of, this is from another community. This is actually Ate Belia. She was so happy when we gave her some oyster cultures with oysters that are already set in place. So all she needs to do is to tie it to their rafts and wait for 8 months. And then trainings and technology transfer is also a big contribution of UPMSI and then BFAR and the FTC, particularly in raft construction, in discussing sustainable oyster culture, in drawing, in engaging the communities to develop their, or to come up with their crop calendar, and then also develop DRRM measures as well. This is Dr. Deo Onda talking to the fisher folks that are stakeholders of the project. So basic science is guiding, okay, the communities throughout the execution of this project. And then another training that we are conducting, that the project conducted, is a training on post-harvest activities. And what's interesting in this picture is that this lady here wearing blue belongs to another community that was trained beforehand. Okay, and then the guys in blue belong to the Oyster Growers Association of Pagbilao. And now it's their turn to share their knowledge to the oyster growers of Macalelon. So there's a sort of paying it forward type of scheme in these activities. And then Tamboyog Development Center conducted financial literacy with the stakeholders. And what's very important here is that from the stakeholders themselves, they told us that we are here for the long run. Okay, of course, they understand that they might not be able to earn as much during the first year, but they believe that the project will be able, in time, if we all do it correctly, it will be able to provide them with alternative sources of livelihood. Now, the following pictures, I love the next couple of slides, because here the stakeholders are now engaging. They are now doing their part. Okay, their contribution to the project is their sweat, their time. Again, these are fisher folks that also spend their time going out to sea catching fish, but because they believe in the project, they devote some of their time in order to make it work, from bringing in bamboos and then drums, and then what you call this, forming the rafts, Okay, and then taking it to the river, anchoring it, and then their wives would make the oyster culches and then put it in strings. So these oyster culches will be the ones that will be hanged on to the oyster floating rafts, okay, by the men, the fisher folks. And then the harvesting part, they will harvest it. And then all the way to the post-harvest activities, um, which was overseen by witness and at the same time by the representatives from DOSTP card, particularly Mama Ann. So oysters and men. So I mean that the next couple of slides are just takeaways. Now it's important. I mean, one of the things that I've learned from this project is that these fisher folks, I mean, believe in the project as much as we do, primarily because we were able to explain it to them. What are the benefits of this project? And for them, this is important because they cannot always go out to sea. There are times wherein the weather is just bad. There are times wherein you'll have a typhoon, and then they cannot go out to sea. And then they see it as an alternative or supplementary source of livelihood. And women also play an important role in the sustainability of this project. There are stories wherein it's the women, the wives, the mothers that are basically encouraging their sons, their husbands to pursue the project. They are the ones encouraging their husbands to be more patient, okay, and just believe in the project. And then another takeaway is that the importance of local knowledge and experience. That's why we always engage them. And then local knowledge in the context of disasters, in the context of crop calendars. So at least that gives us something to work on and then explain it using science. And then whenever our experience is that whenever we engage them, the communities, the stakeholders, the knowledge becomes their own as well. It's not just from the scientists, but it's from them. Another thing that was from the local knowledge and experience of the stakeholders is this net here. So because the river from time to time will experiences high flow velocities, they designed a barrier to protect their rafts from debris, but still allowing for sufficient flow for circulation to occur. And then another important thing that they realize is that from their experience in the first day of the project, they noticed that the areas where the rafts are also getting shallower. And so they suggested that there's a need to transfer the raft to another place in order to allow that particular spot to rest, which is a very important ecological, biggest principle, the rest, okay, which basically came from them. And so just a couple of slides more, the challenges with community engagement. Of course, there's also a challenge in, this was, I asked one of our project staff, Sir Jerry, who's out in the field, what are the challenges and strengths of face? And then here's some of his list. Culture integration. Again, even if we're the Filipinos, all Filipinos from the same island, there are differences in culture as well. Political dynamics. In the middle of the project, there was an election, and then the approach to organizing. Community bio clock. I find this very interesting because these are fishermen. They have their own schedule, which is dictated by the lunar cycle, which is dictated by typhoons and whether the sea will allow them to fish or not. Of course, there are geographical limitations. Specifically, we're based in QC. Language difference, even though they speak Filipino, but subtle manners in speaking sometimes affect relationships and engagement. Strengths, of course, as long as you prepare them, then they will be a self-governed community, a self-sustaining community. and then it's easier to promote advocacies with this sector. And then for us in ASEAN, the presence of the NGO Tambuyog Development Center, Sir Jeric and Ma'am Eva, or in the field is really one of the strengths of this project. And so I will end with these two more slides. So the environmental benefits of shellfish. Shellfish farming can help counter climate change, can help counter ocean acidification. Okay, but it's important to provide the growers with economic sustainability. So this is the main challenge for ASEAN as an industry partner. How do we make this economic? How do we make this sustainable? How do we ensure that every year the stakeholders will earn a little bit more? Okay, take note, and then remember that these communities, the oyster growers, live along the banks of rivers, okay, in estuarine areas, and then they are very much affected by climate change. They're very much affected by coastal hazards. And then what we're proposing to them, the livelihood we're proposing to them can be affected by climate change, but it can also at least deter the effects of climate change. And so on our part, this is our commitment to them. We'll try to make it sustainable economically. And I end with what we always tell them. We tell them in Tagalog, huwag po kayong mag-alala, nandito lang kami. Basta meron kayong produkto ay bibili namin. So we would tell them, don't worry, we're just here. We're here to support you. Whatever products that you are able to produce, we will buy them. And for the UPMSI, BIFAR, Tambuyog team, we're also working with additional projects so that this project becomes part of a program, so that this project and program will become more sustainable. And with that, I would like to express my gratitude. Sorry if I extended my gratitude to DOST Picard, the LG of Macalelon, French from UPMSI, BIFAR, Tambuyog. So maraming salamat po. So ito po yung picture lang namin ng group. Tapos if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sir Emoy, for sharing your experience working with communities, talking about the oyster. Oysters, usually they're very cheap, especially in provinces in the Philippines. But with your talk today, I have a deeper appreciation for this very delicious food that we can buy here. I'm currently in Iloilo, and going around the city, we could buy a whole bucket of oysters for like 60 pesos, steamed oysters. But hearing your talk, it makes me crave oysters, but at the same time, appreciate it and appreciate all the relationships that are important to sustain such sector. So we're now into the open forum. For our participants, please feel free to type your comments or questions in the chat box, and we will ask these to Sir Emoy.
Jean,
Yes,
since
go
you've
ahead.
mentioned the price of oysters in Iloilo, so for our friends from the other parts of
Yes.
the world, in the United States, for example, you can buy a piece of oyster for $1. So that's why there's a term, dollar oysters. But in the Philippines, as Jean mentioned, oysters here are quite cheap. That $1 will get you at least a kilo of oysters, right, Jean? In your place,
Yes.
at least in the provinces, in the main oyster growing areas of the Philippines.
Yeah, so $1, you could buy like a whole bucket of oyster and enjoy that with your friends.
Exactly.
So while we're waiting for the participants to maybe compose or articulate their questions, maybe I'll start. So I've known you as a colleague in the Department of Environmental Science, and ever since our masters, when we were taking our master's degree. So you're a licensed geologist, you took your master's in environmental science, you're now taking your PhD in marine science, studying coastal ecosystems, submarine groundwater discharge, and now you're doing work in the agriculture sector, particularly in oyster culture. Maybe you could share what are some tools, maybe your approaches or skills that these different fields have lent you or equipped you with, that you find have guided you or are really important, indispensable as you do research with communities.
Okay, sige. I guess from the geology part, now a big part of the training in geology is to look at time in the context of geological time. And therefore, I guess that makes me more appreciative of processes that are, as I said, no, very important in sustaining us. So that's one big learning from geology, which I applied to environmental science. I saw the interconnectedness of everything. And then at the heart of it, it's still people. Ako doon pa rin ako eh. Sometimes it gets tiring to work with people. Sometimes I'd wake up in the morning, I will tell myself how I wish I just stuck to being a geologist and stuck to hammering rocks, identifying rocks and minerals, and looking for this gold or copper. But why did I end up dealing with people? Okay, sometimes it's tiring, it's frustrating, but I will always meet people that gives me the inspiration to work for them, or at least colleagues that never that never tires in helping other people. So I guess that's it. Okay, I don't know if that makes sense, no, Jean, but that is. And then one more thing, it's important to, as a scientist, sometimes there's a temptation to be sophisticated, technical. The important thing is to be able to explain to them in their own language. And if you can draw from their experiences and then use their experiences, incorporate all of the scientific, what we call this, theories, all of the science behind the experience, and then share it back to them. That is, I think, very, very important.
Yeah, so as your background suggests, you're a geologist, and you mostly interface with what rocks, and moving to the environmental science field, it's mostly dealing with people. So now that you've mentioned your background in geology, what nudged you to be involved or focus in sustainable food production?
No, business. Sorry. It's still, as I mentioned earlier, it's not, we're not a charity. Okay, still business. There's this, in terms of the business perspective, sustainability, I guess it's the way forward. Okay, for example, if you want to export products, and some countries are looking for traceability. Some countries have non-tariff barriers when they would look at sustainability plans, among other things. So again, it's good business. Okay, with a heart, I guess.
A good business that also sort of addresses some of society's problems with food production. Yes. We have a question from chat. Thank you, Sir E.G. Dizon. His question reads, Sir Emoy, how did you find applying science for establishing oyster production?
Sir E.G. Dizon is actually part of this project. Sir E.G. Dizon is Dr. Deo Onda's handsome research associate. Okay, but to answer your question, Sir E.G., how did you find applying science for establishing oyster production? I guess it's one, it's essential. It's essential because it will allow us to understand as you know, as you've experienced, the processes that are involved in our project area, particularly in the estuarine areas. And you can only do that with science. It cannot be done using guesswork. Pwede siguro. So pwede naman subukan. We can try it then during the first year, but you may end up just wasting a lot of resources. So science allows us a better understanding of the area. It gives us an edge if if our main objective is sustainability, something like that. But as I mentioned earlier, it's always important to bring science to the people. Science, another thrust of the project is also science communication. Okay, science should be understood by the people so that they can apply it.
I like that. Bringing science to the people is very similar to the theme from the previous session, where we sort of translate these information, translate the knowledge so that people will be able to use them. We have another question in chat from Sir James Natividad. In a nutshell, how would you disseminate the important points of your presentation to be understood in a setting similar as meeting like a stranger or anyone who's interested but with little time? It's okay if there was invest in the moment to see the Talaba oysters, wondering why it is such a classy thing outside the Philippines, but here it's not worth as much.
Hirap, no? Parang it's like a beauty pageant question. Okay, let me see how. Give me 10 seconds. Okay. Basically, so I'll start with the last part na. Why is it not as expensive here compared to the United States? I guess for me, oysters is a good oysters is a good representation of our environment. Okay, for example, if I have oysters growing in Manila Bay, okay, so basically that single oyster represents all of the areas surrounding Manila Bay, the watershed that drains into Manila Bay, the good and the bad. And then so I guess that is why, I guess in terms of price, it's not as expensive compared to the other areas. In other countries that I visited, the oysters are specifically grown in areas that are designated oyster culture areas. There are areas that are designated wherein you can get oysters and then you can eat it raw. There are which has a premium to the price of the oysters, and then there are areas that can be consumed only when cooked. I don't know if that statement answers your question, but basically oysters is a good representation of the environment which it is grown. Therefore, to take care of oysters, we need to take care of the environment. I hope that is something that an ordinary stranger can actually at least understand and appreciate. Thank you, James, for that question. It's something that I'll probably continue to think about in the succeeding days. At least a pitch I can share with strangers that I meet in an elevator.
Yeah.
Okay.
Speaking of taking care of the environment, you mentioned that the community helps with monitoring environmental conditions, and along the way they start to own the knowledge, even sharing about how the nets and the transferring of rafts. This question is curious about whether there were instances when the data and observations in the communities point to shifts in environmental conditions that might be impacts of climate change, and how was the community engaged in developing strategies that address these impacts of climate change?
Okay. Sige. Okay, good question. First, let me go back to Ma'am Achu's opening uh,
Remarks.
remarks wherein she shared that we have just been affected by Paeng. Paeng greatly affected at least our operations in the hatchery. Paeng passed through San Juan, Batangas, and it basically flooded the nursery area and then destroyed our rafts, at least the ones owned by Asin. So we took a big loss with Typhoon Paeng. Plus, of course, it destroyed two bridges connecting San Juan, Batangas to Quezon, which will translate into a longer route that our truck will have to take in order to reach our communities in Quezon. So that will add to more expenses. So if we, I mean, if we are to expect more intense typhoons due to climate change, then it will have a big impact in general, at least for the oyster industry. Plus, of course, oysters are actually exist within a certain salinity within certain salinity range. Okay, and so flooding is actually not good. Okay, so if stream waters will have a very low salinity, zero. Actually, after Paeng, the salinity is zero. It's fresh. Then it will pose a significant threat to the oysters. Again, that's one. And then for the communities in Macalelon, actually there was no there but more on the behavior of the two rivers. So at first, because they were listening to what we were telling them, so they suggested another channel wherein they can put the oyster rafts. But then eventually, as it turns out, during summer, the environmental conditions in that particular area is not that good. Okay, it's good during the rainy season, but during summer months, circulation is bad, DO goes down, and so they had to take out their rafts and then either bring it back to the bigger river, or find somewhere else within that channel which has a better circulation. So I guess that's that's my sharing for your question.
We see also dialogue is very important to adapt to climate change, especially in these communities, where very small increments of changes in DO and salinity really impacts their livelihood. Reading from chat as well, there's a comment and a question from Miss Maria Marilu Ibita. She says, "Green business with a heart. Thank you for this presentation from pre-production to post-harvest." She asked, "Do you include oyster recipes and preserved products to enlarge the market and shelf life while also promoting it as nutritious food for the community?"
Thank you, Ma'am Marilu. Actually, this will be part of the next proposal. And then this is also part of an ongoing project engagement between Tamboyog, actually the whole team, and then the communities. Because again, at the end of the day, we would like them to earn a little bit more. And so we need to think out of the box, even for us. So normally for us, we just buy oyster meat, but for the communities, we encourage them to either sell it to the if they can sell it at a higher price to restaurants, and that's good. Or we're finding ways to help them with processing, additional post-harvest processing that will again prolong the shelf life of oysters, because that is very important, and add value. So value added services, I guess, for the oysters is actually in the pipeline. And again, to make this sustainable, they need to earn. Okay, it should be economically sustainable. Thank you, Ma'am Maril.
Thank you for that, Sir MY. We also have another question here from Dr. Kuya Geng. It reads, "A documentary I watched also emphasized the role of oyster hatcheries in protecting the land together with mangroves. Could you please explain how this helps the area?"
Okay, Mama Chut, I'll try my best. But in the United States, this is, I guess, if I'm not mistaken, in the United States, in recent years, their oyster reefs are on the decline. And so hatcheries are able to produce oyster, the seedlings, so that they can actually transplant and produce and help these oyster reefs, natural oyster reefs, grow and develop. And again, like mangroves, they can only protect us from storm surge if they grow to a certain extent, meaning if they are wide, if they are tall, if they are dense, if they are mature. So that is mainly the importance of hatcheries, particularly in the United States. Because I mean, environmental conditions, for example, in the United States, from time to time, their major oyster growing areas are affected by a high precipitation, which lowers salinity, and therefore the natural oysters will just decline. So they have to introduce hatchery bred oyster seeds in order to supplement the natural populations. So yun po, Ma'am Achu. I hope medyo ano ba, medyo does that make sense? But actually, there's actually one project in the United States as well, yung tawag nila $1 million oyster, the Million Oyster Project. Wherein they use oysters to clean a river in New York, if I'm not mistaken, because they are good filter feeders. They a particular species can actually filter 5 liters per hour, if I'm not mistaken. So what we are actually in a scene we're talking about, what if we try this? What if we put a lot of oysters in Pasig River? What will happen? Technically, it will filter it. But of course, it has to be studied real well. As I said, it's not a silver bullet. There are always strengths and weaknesses. And a very important thing to consider is that what if that the oysters that were grown in Pasig River were sold to restaurants? For example, if the oysters that we are selling to our clients, they still have our oysters still have to go through a series of tests, the bacteriological tests as well as heavy metal tests from time to time. So things like that.
Yeah. This is a follow-up to the question, could that reasoning be used in the Philippines? So you presented the case in the US. Could that be used in the Philippines?
I mean, yes, ma'am, as long as all of the other mechanisms are already in place. Yes. But the more current research is not just limited to oysters and oyster culture, because by itself it can also become an oyster a carbon source. So the best approach is to do IMTA. The best approach is to mix oysters with seaweed, basically mix it with other organisms that share that will actually help cycle the all the other nutrients as well. So ganun yung movement. If it's just purely oysters, I'm sure there will always be, there will be a lot of negative consequences.
There will be some unintended consequences.
There should always be a balance, and oysters should always follow the carrying capacity of the area where they are actually grown in culture.
It's good that you mentioned that, because I've also read that oysters can somehow mitigate the impacts of tidal waves, but maybe there might be unintended consequences.
So it's basically
oyster reefs, yeah.
But in the Philippines, we have coral reefs more than oyster reefs. So again, if you want to make, parang ano naman yun, why build an oyster reef when
you already have?
We can develop and protect, or at least protect our coral reefs.
Coral reefs.
In the tropics, they are in a more temperate region. That's why they have the oyster reefs fits them well, better.
So unfortunately, that's all the time we have. But before we end the open forum, let me just read a last comment from Ma'am Ebita. She said, wonderful, given that 1 out of 3 kids 5 years old and below, there can be recipes that they can eat, or that the community members can also eat. Often these are best exported from the community and the people do not get to eat it. Wishing you the best. Thank you very much, Sir Emoy, and thank you very much to our participants for your questions and for the very engaging open forum.
Okay.
We now move to the awarding of certificate. We present this certificate of appreciation to Mr. Raymond Rodolfo for sharing his time and insights in the webinar titled Sustainable Production and Stakeholder Engagement, held on the 11th of November 2022. Signed by Jean Hardalesa Mijares, Program Manager for Climate and Disaster Resilience of Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, and Dr. Charlotte Kendra Gotanco Gonzalez, Director of the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability and the focal point of the My Climate Risk Ateneo de Manila University Regional Hub. Once again, thank you very much, Sir Emoy, for sharing your time and insights with us.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Jean. And I'm accepting this award on behalf of my friends at Sci2SOS and all of our partner
Thank you very much. Right, to give the closing remarks, may we call on Ms. Abigail Marie Favis, the Program Manager for Campus Sustainability and the Officer in charge of the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability.
Thank you so much, Gian, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm sure all of you will agree with me when I say that it has been such an inspiring and uplifting hour and such a great way to end a busy work week. Parang masarap managinip mamaya. So we deeply appreciate the deeply personal storytelling that Mr. Rodolfo has shared with us, which highlighted the intersectional issues that connect sustainable development, food security, aquaculture, climate risk, and stakeholder and community engagement and empowerment. Gian and I have had the privilege of visiting the Asin Oyster Hatchery in Batangas, and we've seen firsthand the work and the time that Mr. Rodolfo and his team has invested in growing the business with and for the community. And Sci2SOS, Science to the Rescue, is an excellent example of how research can produce tangible results that directly benefit communities and hits the sweet spot, the nexus between science and society. So stories like his draw attention to the human side of climate research and action. And traditionally, climate research has been framed within the natural sciences, but climate impacts and issues are mediated through social, cultural, and economic and cultural systems and practices. So Mr. Rodolfo drives home the point that if we are to design and conduct research that produces sustainable and just solutions, we must work with and learn from communities so we can address social, cultural, and economic underpinnings and contexts, which are often closely linked with injustice and with inequality like poverty, like gender. I'm glad Mr. Rodolfo highlighted the role of women in sustainability. So this inclusive approach, which engages different stakeholders, amplifies the positive impact of research and development work and empowers and enables communities and provides ownership and strengthens their agency. So finally, hearing directly from the people and communities at the front lines of climate action, research, and stakeholder engagement humanizes the information and the data and the numbers that we hear about from someone else. So the diverse voices and faces that we've been hearing from, seeing, and experiencing in these webinars, and we have 3 more sessions to look forward to in this webinar series, helps us empathize more deeply with those directly affected by the climate change. The challenge for us in the audience, the recipients of all of this experience and insight, is how do we translate and mobilize our feelings and knowledge into action? How do we answer the call to be, as Sir Emoy reminds us earlier, be more generous, live more simply, or to live within the means of the planet so we can take better care of each other, not just to endure, but also to nourish and, of course, flourish. So as this session comes to a close, we thank very much Mr. Emoy Rodolfo for the pearls of insight. So I hope you see what I did there. The pearls of insight and his generosity in sharing his stories and experience. I also thank the My Climate Risk team, especially Jean, Kendra, and Daniel, for putting together this webinar series for us and highlighting the people and communities on the front line of climate action. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Have a restful weekend ahead. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Favis. Yes, so how do we empower ourselves in the community, take on the challenge to translate our feelings and our knowledge into actions we flourish together? At this point, may we ask everyone to please turn your videos on as we take a group photo. So I'll be taking the group photo, just waiting for the rest of the participants to turn your videos on. Okay, let me take the first photo, the first panel. Please hold your smiles in 3, 2, 1. And now the next panel in 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, everyone. It's very wonderful to see your faces and your smiles.
Congrats, MI.
Thanks, ma'am. EG, thank you. Matin ka.
Before we end the session, we would like to request our participants to please answer a feedback form. We greatly appreciate your feedback. The link and the QR code are flashed on the screen. Requests for e-certificates may be coursed through the same form. We thank again Sir Emoy for sharing his insights and his time. We'd also like to thank the sign language interpreters. We have Ms. Edna Comia and Ms. Annalisa Regis Tolentino. And to all of you, thank you very much for your participation in this webinar. We hope you have gained fresh insights on stakeholder engagement, the importance of cross-sectoral collaboration to address climate risk. Please again, don't forget to accomplish our event evaluation form, and our tech team has also posted the link in chat. Again, requests for e-certificates will be coursed through the same form. Our next session for this series will happen in about 2 weeks. We would love to have you again for our third session, which will be titled Conversations, Memories, and Dreams, Climate Communication that Goes Beyond Information Packaging, with Dr. Maria Ines Angela Ponce de Leon of the Department of Communication in Ateneo de Manila University. That's on November 23 at 4 in the afternoon, Philippine Standard Time. You may register in the link shown on screen. Okay, that is it for today's session. Thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day and have a happy weekend.